Season 1, Episode 3. Welcome to Forever Break Podcast. Now, two people who are still trying to figure out that Eastern squat toilet. Here are your hosts, Lianne and Corey.
All right, well, thank you so much, and thank you, as always, voiceover guy. You are just fantastic.
Shh, I'm meditating right now.
Sorry. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, got to do your thing. Anyway, we're going to continue. Welcome, everyone, to this episode on personality types. Excited to have you here for all of Season 1, where we are continuing our coverage of mindfulness.
We are indeed. And on this episode, like Corey said, we're going to be looking at personality types. We're going to be seeing what they are and how they actually work, and how accurate the study of personality types actually is.
We got a few different ways that you guys can go ahead and take different tests and apply your results to your lives. And we've got an interview with the wonderful AJ Drenth, the founder of Personality Junkie website and author of several personality type and INTP specific books. He's going to be answering all of our questions regarding personality types, and we are even going to discuss our test results with him.
Free therapy, woohoo!
Yeah, it's pretty sweet. So stay tuned for that, and as always, guys, Forever Break website.
foreverbreak.com.
Yeah, check it out for even more stuff, and we've got plenty of it there for you.
Quick quote.
Differences are not intended to separate, to alienate. We are different precisely in order to realize our need of one another. By Archbishop Desmond Tutu.
Taking center stage.
So personality types, guys, if you've probably gotten a new job in the last, 5-10 years, there's a chance that you've taken one of these as part of the hiring process. I know a lot of colleges are using them as well to help people figure out the way that they're going to study. There's a range of these types of personality tests that are out there and online, but one of the better known and arguably more accurate is the Myers-Briggs model. This model is based on the idea that people can fall into one and sometimes two of 16 different personality types.
So the Myers-Briggs test is based on the theory of Carl Jung. And Carl Jung, who is he, I hear you say? He was a Swiss psychoanalyst and psychiatrist who founded analytical psychology. He was a contemporary of Sigmund Freud and a leading exponent of Gestalt, I'm probably butchering that, personality theory.
Yeah, he developed a groundbreaking personality theory that introduced two attitudes, extroversion and introversion, and then further studied human behavior and broke it down into a combination of 4 psychic functions: thinking versus feeling, intuition versus sensation.
The Myers-Briggs model applies this theory into different levels, thus coming up with 16 different personality types. But it goes into a little bit more detail. For example, not all extroverts are the same. Even two people with the same 4-letter personality type can be different.
We fall into that category.
We do indeed. The idea is to figure out what type you are via a short test and then learn about your type habits and your strengths and weaknesses in order to maximize what you get out of your everyday life. It's huge in the workplace, like Corey said, and understanding more about your co-workers creates a more harmonious and respectful environment. But it also applies at home with our personal relationships as well.
We took the tests, and it was funny how parts of the descriptions are so accurate. It's really uncanny. If you see somebody who feels a bit misunderstood or alone in life, hop onto the test and you will see that you aren't alone. The profile results make a very interesting read. It can be really beneficial. There's some interesting stuff about what your habits are and how you receive information, and there's huge amounts of information in regards to relationships, both romantic and non-romantic. It's just interesting reading your partner's personality type, and nice to know if you're dating a complete psycho or not.
I mean, is there an option for complete psycho?
There's not an option for me. I'll tell you that right now.
Well, you already are, friend. You already are.
No, I'm psycho.
Oh, I was saying that I was psycho, but actually, no, I'm very not.
Yeah, only a psycho would call themselves psycho.
You do have a crazy look in your eye right now. So we took our test and we found out that we, like Corey said, we both are the same. We got the entertainer, which is the ESFP category. I actually took the test twice because, like I said on the interview, there was a couple of different places you can get them. But when I went onto AJ's website, I got ESXP. So they're both still the performer, but the X according to AJ's site means that it isn't quite clear whether I rely on feeling or thinking. And when reading a lot of the information for this, I can see where that link would come through. Although I definitely think both of us, whilst we are super extroverted, we do like to go back into our little introvert hidey holes, don't we?
Yeah.
Refresh the batteries.
Yeah, one of the things that I bring up in the interview is how I took one of these tests a few years ago for a new job that I had. And I would tell you that if you do take it, read the little synopsis that they give you, but then plug your numbers or your letters into Google and go take a deeper dive into what it means, because
there's so much information out there.
And you'll just start reading things about you that it's like, how based on these random questions can somebody know this? It was kind of like almost like going to a psychic. It was really strange, but I think you guys will really benefit from it. If you haven't taken one of them, do it.
Expert interview.
So to discuss these results and to answer the burning questions you're probably thinking of, we are joined today by AJ Drenth, personality type expert. AJ is the founder of the website Personality Junkie, where you can get ebooks, take tests, and even study a course on personality types and learn more about yourself and those around you. AJ has 4 books on typology and currently boasts the 2 best-selling INTP books on Amazon. So thank you for joining us, AJ.
All right, so we are here with Dr. AJ Drenth. AJ, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. Greetings from California.
So I'm just kind of curious how the personality types, how did this become part of your life? When did you first discover your own personality type, and then how has it sort of changed, this understanding of that? How has that changed your life?
Wow, that's a big question. I'll try to give you a relatively brief version of that. I first encountered the personality system that I work with the most, called the Myers-Briggs. It's one of the more popular taxonomies in the world, actually. And it was first founded by Carl Jung back in the early 20th century. But after Jung, Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs and Myers came along and developed a test called the MBTI, which was kind of used in the post-war period to help military folks find careers and jobs afterwards. So I first encountered the MBTI when I was in college, like many college students, and perhaps some of your listeners. I'm sure lots of your listeners have taken it, whether it's for looking for a college major or applying for a job. I wouldn't say it's universal, but it's used fairly frequently. And so I was kind of like many people, trying to find myself, trying to, find my path in life, understand what I should be doing. And as soon as I took the test and started kind of reading through some of the descriptions, it wasn't long before I was hooked, honestly. There's just something about it. It's not for everyone. Not everyone gets, thrilled to know their personality type, but for people like me, it was just like almost magical. You start reading through the descriptions and you're like, wow, this is amazing. I never knew anything like this existed before. And it gave me some insight too into like why it was different from some of my classmates. I kind of I felt like I learned in a different way than a lot of my peers did. And knowing that personality element really helped kind of clarify why that was the case for me. But I'm a person who really likes to dig into the details of something once I encounter something I'm really passionate about. And so I proceeded to keep reading. I would keep buying books. Who's the expert in this field? What people should I be listening to really get my head around what this personality stuff is all about. And like a lot of people too, I wasn't really positive about my type when I first took it, and so I was kind of debating between maybe 1 or 2, 3 types, even for many months, maybe even a couple of years before I kind of settled on this is my type for sure. And so that's a pretty common experience among my blog readers and audience. So they kind of come to, but I'm getting ahead of myself. They come to my website for insight into that. But so in doing all of this research, I even got into reading a lot of academic papers on psychology. And about 10 years later, give or take, I decided, well, I'm going to just put myself out there and start writing about it. And so I started a blog called Personality Junkie in 2009, threw up a few career articles on the website, and was pleasantly surprised to see that people were actually reading them and giving pretty good feedback. And so that's always inspiring. It kind of kept me going, kept me researching and writing more. And it was actually only a couple years after that I actually met my longtime colleague, Elaine Shalleck, who eventually became my wife through the website. And so we've kind of been a dynamic duo at Personality Junkie ever since. And she's really inspired and helped me, grow as a writer and a thinker. And, we're always talking about type. So this feels pretty natural to talk about type for me. So I'm excited to convey some insight to your readers about it today, or to your listeners.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I guess that kind of brings me to what, in your opinion, what are the three most important reasons why our listeners should understand their personality types?
Well, kind of going back to my story, what was most important for me was to figure out who I was, kind of figure out my path in life. And I usually, on the website, I often summarize it as, finding identity and purpose, finding your identity and purpose in the world. And one of the reasons why I think type is so popular and useful in our modern world is because, we have all of these paths, all of these options before us. You may have heard of the paradox of choice by Barry Schwartz. Talks about, you go into a supermarket and, you see 20 varieties of spaghetti on the shelf, whereas before in the good old days, it used to be like 2 or 3. And, the same thing with with our modern identity, like back in the day, people would find themselves, or there really wasn't much of a process of finding yourself. You would simply kind of inherit the family business, inherit the, religion that you were born into in your family. But nowadays, like, everything is wide open. You have to figure everything out for yourself. And so I see personality, one of the value for me of personality type, and for lots of others, is it just kind of helps you kind of narrow down the options a little bit, at least, and gives you a sense of where you fit into the bigger picture of humanity in some respects, because there are, at least according to the Myers-Briggs, there are 16 personality types. So everyone has a type. And so you kind of get a sense after you learn about it a little bit, kind of where you fit into the picture as far as like what kind of career path you might take. Gives you insight into, why am I different from my family members, from my schoolmates, and so forth. So there's that identity and purpose element is a big one for me.
Yeah, it seems like if you were, sitting somewhere in like a library job and you take this test and all of a sudden you realize you're a huge extrovert, kind of like how we're going to talk about this later, but kind of how Lianne and I tested, that would just kind of, be eye-opening, at least provoke some thought for you to be like,
am I in the right career?
Should I really be doing this? Or I should be doing something where maybe I'm engaging with people a little bit more. Like maybe that would overall make me happier. Maybe I'll be better at my job and that kind of stuff. It can just kind of be a pathway towards that kind of thing, it feels like.
Exactly. And I think a lot of people will realize some of that kind of instinctually. Like, I would hate working in a library, for instance, or for me, working with people in a fast-paced job as an introvert would be very energy draining for me. So I would kind of maybe just intuitively know that about myself. But it's always nice to see it actually spelled out and say, that's why I'm like that. And so actually by labeling things, it sometimes gives us a little bit it gives us a starting point for research, for one thing. Like, if you learn that you're an extrovert or an introvert, then you can kind of go read about it and say, that's, it kind of snowballs and you learn more about yourself just through that. The second reason, going back to Leanne's question about why people should know their personality type, is it's also a lens for self-development. And, we talked about the identity and purpose, but it also gives you a path for growth. And I can explain to you a little bit about the Carl Jung's version of typing, and which eventually, as I discussed earlier, became the Myers-Briggs. But Jung's idea was that our personality is comprised of kind of pairs of opposites, and these include things like thinking and feeling and sensing and intuition and introversion, extroversion, and so forth. And so every type, a lot of people don't know this, but if you test as, say, an ESFP, that the S stands for sensation or sensing. And a lot of people think, well, if I test as a sensing type, that means that I don't use intuition, because intuition is the opposite. But in fact, we all use all the functions. It's just that we use some more than others. And so that's why they're often referred to as preferences. But the beauty of the system is that if in fact you are like a sensing type, your path toward growth will include developing your intuition. So it means moving toward that other part of that opposite. And so that gives, you can kind of go through all your letters, all your functions, and kind of see the areas where you can improve on and maybe grow toward as you mature in life. And it especially tends to come to a head at like midlife crises. For instance, people who have been using the strengths of their type for many years might kind of grow tired of those a little bit and start exploring other parts of their personality. And having a knowledge of type actually gives you a sense of what things you might be wise to explore. Another way of explaining these functions, these opposites that exist within us, is you can think of them as kind of like a community within you. So you have thinking and feeling and sensing and intuition, and all these different parts of you have different needs and desires. And so just like you would, a lot of thinkers and feelers pair together in relationships, right? And they often find, well, like we don't always see things eye to eye. We have different wants, we have different desires. And the same thing actually exists within each of us in terms of these functions, as we each have a thinking and feeling function. And these functions kind of have to go back and forth and dialogue with each other. And that too can contribute to personal growth as you learn to explore and listen to the different parts of yourself and learn how to make them work well together, right?
Yeah. And I guess for me, my kind of take from all of these tests is development. It's like you said, it's all about progress. And in order to develop or in order to progress, you have to have an understanding of yourself.
Yeah,
and
I think that's important.
Yeah, they're very helpful.
I am curious too, just kind of talking about how obviously through time and through people like you who are studying this, it grows. So there's different personality types, models, and different things. There's Myers-Briggs, and if I'm butchering the name of this, Enneagram. Two of the most popular. I'm curious, why do you personally favor, or are you primarily focused on Myers-Briggs? And then the second question that I would have based on that is that there's obviously some debate amongst these, and people say that it's flawed. So in your opinion, what limitations should people be aware of when they're taking these tests?
Oh, that's a great question. I would personally add into those two systems you mentioned, the Enneagram and the Myers-Briggs, is another up-and-coming system is called the Big Five. And the Big Five is the leading academic model of personality. So that's an important one to include in the discussion as well, I think. As far as why I prefer, I tend to focus on the Myers-Briggs, but I am conversant with all three of these models, and I actually appreciate different aspects of each of them. So I'll just give you a quick kind of rundown of how I conceive of these things. So I think of the Enneagram as being, if you think of a continuum, and on one end of the continuum you have meaning, and on the other side you have science or scientific precision, right? So the Enneagram I see as a heavy on the meaning end of the spectrum. It's kind of has spiritual roots. It comes out of a kind of a spiritual ecosystem, and it's been around a while. It's a pretty ancient personality system, but the reason I see it as meaningful is it gives you kind of themes. Your type is kind of a theme of who you are. So kind of like an archetype. Like I'm an investigator, or I'm an artist, and so that kind of taps into the identity and purpose thing that I was mentioning earlier. So a lot of people find that to be just a valuable system. It's actually caught on more in the last 5 or 10 years. And even in churches here in the U.S., I don't know about elsewhere, but a lot of churches have started using the Enneagram, which is kind of interesting. So on the other end of our spectrum is the Big Five, and that's the academic model. And that the strength of that is it's academic. So it uses a lot of empirical studies. It's very precise, and so it has that strength of having the academic world behind it. However, I would consider it kind of a flat model in the sense of I feel like it lacks some of the dynamism and meaningfulness and even utility as far as application that the Enneagram and the Myers-Briggs have. And so the Myers-Briggs model, which is the one that I use most often, the strengths is it's kind of the sweet spot between the two in my view. Many of its categories correlate with the Big Five, so there's a lot of empirical and conceptual overlap between those two models. But I also feel like it offers a lot of meaning and opportunities for growth in the same way that the Enneagram does. So for me, kind of being a logical person, I like the fact that Myers-Briggs has a little bit more structure, a little bit more in the way of logical consistency, in my opinion, than the Enneagram. But all three are great systems. Finally, to wrap up with your question about the veracity of the Myers-Briggs, I would just, I think that a lot of people who kind of pick at it are just naysayers toward personality systems in general. I think a lot of people feel like they pigeonhole. I don't want to be put in a box sort of thing. But in actuality, I usually reply that, you actually become less biased, in my view, if you understand the various personality types out there, because you have a better understanding of other people and the way they think, and therefore you're not expecting everyone to think like you, right? So that's just an argument for personality systems in general. And with respect to the Myers-Briggs, that empirical overlap that it has with a Big Five, I think, is a big talking point and should be brought up more often, because all four of the dichotomies actually correlate fairly well to the Big Five. They're just kind of use different names, really. So I can go into that more if you'd like, but for me, that's one of the main strengths as far as the empirical validity of the Myers-Briggs.
Yeah. And we know there's loads of organizations that offer these personality tests, but where would you recommend our listeners to go to take the Myers-Briggs test? And a quick online test as beneficial as doing the test as part of reading a book, such as your own?
Yeah. The Myers-Briggs, the official Myers-Briggs website is at myersbriggs.org. So they can direct you to the various, a couple of different organizations that offer the tests if you just visit that site. We at Personality Junkie have a nice little 40-question test that most people seem to enjoy. And, so I'd recommend you check that one out as well. The thing about taking tests is, whenever you use a self-reporting test, there are various problems that can come along with that. Whether it's, I just started a job and I have to be very extroverted in my job, and so you start over time you start thinking of yourself as more maybe extroverted than you really are. So circumstances can affect how you might answer the various questions.
Yeah.
So I usually say that, take a few tests, and that can give you a nice ballpark idea of your personality type. and then go ahead and start reading about the types and study the system a little bit, so you can get like a broader understanding of the whole type ecosystem. And then you can kind of go back and say, well, is my type accurate, or do I need to maybe rethink it a little bit? So you can kind of tweak it a little bit as you go. I think probably one of the most accurate means is having an expert type you, someone who has really spent a lot of time observing and working with type. But that's not an option for a lot of people. So, but you can if you put your mind to it and take some good tests, you can usually at least get pretty close within one letter of your actual type.
I took two, so I took the one on your site and I took the original Myers-Briggs, and it was really interesting because the I can't remember what letter it was, but it was I had an X on your website, which was really interesting because you're saying, well, it's actually not clear whether you're this or this based on your answers, which I found was really interesting because I guess on the other one, it must have kind of like pushed me into a different category based on my answers.
Yeah, I mean,
was like, well, actually, we don't have enough information to categorize that one.
Exactly. So we have that option on there just as a way of like kind of cueing people into the fact that your type is pretty close to right down the middle, so you may need to either, kind of retake the test or think, kind of read about that particular dimension of your personality and see if you can get a better sense of where you might fall on one side or the other. Because most often you do have a preference. It's just maybe the questions just were a little unclear for you, and you might just have to sit with it a little bit more.
And that kind of leads me into the next question of just overall mindset. I think a lot of times people are taking these tests as they're starting down a new path of sorts. Like maybe it's a new job, getting into college, trying to figure out what path they want to go there. And if I were to take that test right before I'm starting a new job, I've got all this excitement. If I'm 5 years into that job and I just had a really stressful day and I take that test again, is that going to reflect the difference in the score? Do you guys have any sort of
like a guideline?
Like a guideline or just something that you say like we want you to be as neutral as possible in this for this?
Yeah, usually the wording that I use is answer in a way that's consistent with your historical personality. So almost like trying to figure out like what is my personality on balance over the course of my life, instead of just saying, well, what is my personality this week or today. So taking maybe a little bit of trying to bring that mindset to the test, I think is a pretty good way of going about it.
Okay, and in your book, My True Type, Clarifying Your Personality Type, Preferences and Functions, you mentioned that after taking the test, some people aren't sure if the result is accurate. But isn't it true that others feel something click into place, like you were saying happened to you after taking the test? And it's like they're understood for the first time.
Absolutely. So
why, in your opinion, do some people feel the results are more accurate than others?
Yeah, I mean, it's striking. Sometimes the combination of the person taking the test and the test itself, along with the description of the results that you get after taking it, sometimes that just does click. And I think one of the reasons why some people will either maybe gravitate toward one website versus the other, or one system versus the other, is they feel like their personality is best captured by, say, the Enneagram more so than it is by the Myers-Briggs types. So there's just a sense of resonance maybe with one system or one type over others. And that's probably about as much as I could say about that. It's not always clear cut why it resonates. And I guess the one thing I would add is that some people, I think, have a little bit better understanding of themselves, and others a little bit more self-reflective maybe going in. And so that may assist with answering the questions well, and then therefore getting an accurate description at the end.
Yeah, we were actually just talking about something like that. I've given Lianne a lot of compliments because she's always had this like great self-awareness of who she is, and That's something that I haven't always had through my life. And I think that was when I took one of these tests, I think it was about 5 years ago, I had started a new job, and it gave me the readout. It gave me my numbers or my letters of what I was, but then it just gave a very detailed, I think it was like a 20-page printout of what it all meant. And I was reading through it all, and it was it was just like somebody was like reading my diary to me or something like that. It was just mind-boggling how accurate it was, and I was just blown away by it. So that I can imagine something like that happening to someone like you, who's like, I am going to dig in even more. But it got me kind of thinking about the nature versus nurture aspect. And I was like, one, was I born like this, or did the way that I was raised kind of get me to this? I think it's usually probably a little bit of a balance of both. And then two, as I'm getting older, I am becoming a little bit more introverted than I used to be, even though I still scale on the extrovert side. And I'm wondering if people take it through life, if you've seen that change.
Oh, absolutely. The nature nurture issue is always a factor. I tend to say it's roughly 50-50 on that one. Just, it seems, based on the research that I've read, there's obviously contributions from both sides of that. We do tend to kind of suggests that type usually doesn't change a lot over the lifetime, but you can kind of grow and evolve within your type. So Corey, if you're an extrovert and you mentioned that you've become a little more introverted over time, that's actually a sign of growth for you, because you're developing some of that introverted side, which will help make you a more balanced person, and probably give you better results, more tools in your toolbox to work with as you go through life. So, and that's pretty normal. And
I like the balance. Now you're speaking to the Libra inside.
All right, that's one system I don't know much about, unfortunately, but. I guess I got to draw the line somewhere.
Me neither.
Yeah. You never know. And
exactly.
So we've talked about knowing about yourself, but how about with romantic relationships? Are there certain personality type pairings that are better suited in those relationships? Or would you consider it a faux pas to ask a potential partner's personality type on a first date? Like, hey, Lianne, I'm a HSBC or whatever.
I hope I don't give away someone's secret, but I've actually received a few emails from people who are planning to start some sort of dating service based on personality types. So we'll see how that goes. It probably won't be too long before that sort of option is available.
It makes sense from the untrained person. It kind of makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of the services already are factoring in personality data. They're just not using like formal type lingo necessarily to do it. So, I don't think there's a perfect answer to your question. I think any two people can work as far as the relationship is concerned if they're fairly mature and don't have ego problems. But as far as the type is concerned, I think a lot of people on the opposites attract idea is fairly common. When I observe people across the board, a lot of times you'll see introverts and extroverts pairing, for instance, incredibly common. I would say maybe even 2/3 of the time you'll see that, especially early in life. That seems to be the case. And I think as people age and grow and so forth and become more balanced, they may decide that they want to be with someone a little bit more similar to them. So they may, end up pairing with someone who shares multiple letters in common with them as far as their type is concerned. But, whenever one way of thinking about that is differences create interest, right? Like, that's intriguing. You're so different than I am in that, in this way, or I want to learn more about that. But they also can contribute to problems at times, because that means you're likely going to see the world differently in many regards, because you're kind of coming at it through a different lens. Personality is in many respects a lens through which we see the world. And unless we can become familiar with our partner's lens and try to see things the way they do, we're going to be at odds with each other. And so regardless of what type your partner is, if you're willing to invest time in learning about their type and learning about them, both of you can kind of come to common ground more easily and be more generous with each other, because you're not expecting the other to change and be just like you are.
Yeah, I think that's probably the best thing you can do, right? No matter what you, whatever each other are, it's just important to maybe know that about the other person, learn something about that, and then it kind of relates how you can better communicate and all of that kind of stuff. These obviously these pillars of foundation for relationships. We're going to pop into the section of the show now where we try and get some free psychoanalysis.
Yeah, we do.
All right.
We both scored the exact same, ESFP-A. And so we are just curious what you think about that. What are some ways you'd expect us to complement each other? And what are some potential clash points that we might want to watch out for?
Okay.
Be gentle.
All right. I'll do my best again. The A variable, which is the fifth one that you mentioned, is actually not part of the original Myers-Briggs. I think that's coming from maybe the 16 Personalities website. It actually refers to assertive. Yeah, it refers to assertive, and the complement to that is turbulent. And so, the turbulent person has a more kind of ever changing. They have a lot of changing and shifting moods, and maybe are more prone to a lot of like mood swings and negative emotions. And so there's a little. It corresponds to a factor on the Big Five called emotional stability. So assertive people are going to have a little bit more emotional stability maybe than turbulent folks. So I just wanted to clarify that. But as far as the ESFP part, basically on the Myers-Briggs, that breaks down to extroverted, sensing, which is, if you're a sensing type, it means you kind of deal with the world in a concrete fashion. So you're like a street smart person. You enjoy like taking action, taking care of practical tasks. Whereas the intuitive types, which I'm an intuitive type, are a little bit more maybe conceptual, theoretical, often, kind of like sitting around, kicking around ideas with people a little bit more than sensing types. The feeling part that's the feeling thinking dichotomy. Just basically means that, as a feeler, you're apt to be a little more empathetic. Naturally, you're going to be a little more people oriented than the thinking types. And then the final variable is perceiving, and its complement is judging. So perceiving means you kind of keep your options open. You go with the flow. You're spontaneous. And so that's a very characteristic of ESFP types. ESFPs are very kind of fluid and flexible. You can adapt on the fly. You're quick responders. And so I think the fact that both of you are kind of that ilk means that you're going to get along pretty well, because you're both adaptable and willing to maybe play off of each other pretty well. And the only variable that could feasibly get in the way is if one of you is trying to kind of constantly overtalk the other one. That's maybe the extroverted part, as well as the assertive part, that assertive variable on the end, if you're kind of railroading each other at times. But you don't seem to have that problem so far. So I think
only when the bottle of wine gets empty.
Exactly. Then things get a little raucous. Huh?
And it's completely me when the bottle of wine's empty. And career-wise, ESFPs, they tend to go often into social careers, working with people, or careers where they're kind of in action. Like they make great performers. A lot of famous vocalists are ESFPs. They may enjoy a lot of them enjoy cooking. What's that? I said, and podcast hosts by any chance?
And podcast hosts, yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
absolutely. A lot of ESFPs and ENFPs as well. There are a lot of intuitive types doing podcasts. So, So far, you guys are doing great. So whatever you're doing is working.
There we go. High five. Virtual high five. So you've talked about us. You've talked about us. Let's move over to you. And you've written several books about personality types, including The 16 Personality Types, Profiles Theory and Type Development, and My True Type, clarifying your personality type, preferences, and functions. What can our listeners expect to learn from reading these books?
Sure. The first book I wrote was The 16 Personality Types, and that gives basically a general overview of all the 16 Myers-Briggs types. It includes kind of general introductory description of each type, as well as looks at each of those separate functions that we went over. Like, so you can see how like the sensing or the intuition plays out in a given personality type. And so it kind of gives you a big picture. And the book also touches on like kind of your path to growth as well. So you can see, kind of what that might look like for your particular personality type. My other book is My True Type, and that one is kind of designed to help you with self-typing. So if you took a test and you're not quite sure of your type, or you want to learn more about the different variables that go into determining your type and different strategies for self-typing, I would recommend that book. And then I also wrote two books on my particular personality type, which is INTP. One is kind of a general look at the INTP, and the second one looks at the INTP from the perspective of their finding their purpose and their philosophy of life. So that one's called the INTP Quest. Mm-hmm. So it kind of builds on the first book. So a lot of INTPs enjoy those.
I am curious too, just kind of based on what you had said about the potential for like where this might lead in the realm of dating and stuff like that. What do you kind of see as the future? Like, where do you think that this is going in 5 or 10 years?
As far as dating, maybe with the apps and so forth. It's hard to say. One potential hang up there is a lot of times people don't get their type exactly right. And so, you may not get exactly what you bargained for if you think someone is this type and then they show up and they're not that type really.
Yeah.
But and I don't know, it feels a little bit, maybe a little bit engineered, but I guess all of the dating sites anyway, like I said, are using some sort of personality algorithm to start with. Mm-hmm. So, I think there's value there, and it's just going to, I guess, probably involve finding the right balance of, using type, but not taking it in such a narrow way where we're eliminating other good options for ourselves,
Yeah.
So that would be one of my concerns with that. But I'm not a millennial, so I'm on the young side of the Gen X generation. So I never really got into using the dating apps. So I'm a little bit behind the times there.
We're probably really close because I'm on the bubble of millennial.
Corey's convinced that he's an X-Gen.
I mean, all my tendencies. All my tendencies. Look at my Spotify playlist.
all Gen Xer songs, huh?
Yeah, exactly. Awesome. Well, we really just thank you so much for spending some time with us. Just really great to talk to someone and take a little bit deeper dive into this, because the last time that that last test that I took, it just blew my mind, some of the things that it came back to me and said. And I think that if people are hearing this for the first time, it at least will provoke some thought and just be like, wonder what it says I am. And
to hear something from an expert, which is nice to know, and you get to digest all the information.
And we're going to have all the information and links to your website in our show notes so people can hopefully find that. And if they really want to take the next step and start reading some of your books, we'll have info on that. And just, AJ, thank you so much for hanging out with us and spending some time.
You're welcome. I really enjoyed it.
Let's unpack that.
All right. Well, a lot of good information and just overall, just a ton of information overload. So I think we throw you guys back to what we learned in episode 1 with Chris Armstrong, where he suggests just to let things sink in a little bit. So we wouldn't say just go and take 5 of these tests that you can find online right away. Like, take one, read about your type a little bit, get to know that, start questioning some of the things just because, this is still something that's being studied.
Try and look for patterns in your life where you can, if you can agree or not agree. I think that's a good way to go forward with that, isn't it? But so much information. That was such a good interview. I like that one.
Yeah, no, he was really great. I mean, I just think that for me, it's just been this really eye-opening thing. And for me in the workplace, when we started discovering how people were, and then we started to just we would think about clients and stuff like that, and we'd be like, oh, they just seem a little bit more introverted. So if I go to them with a problem or I go to them with something that we've got to discuss, here might be the best way to do that.
That's a smart way of looking at it.
Yeah, it was just something that us as a team would do, and it was I found it to be very highly beneficial in so many aspects. So it's something to at least think about.
And in relationships, like we were saying as well, like, imagine you and your partner, you kind of like, you're in close quarters, you just want to bicker a little bit, or you find that your partner's doing something really annoying, but actually, if you just sit down and take a minute, you're like, oh, actually, this is probably why they're doing that. They're not mad at me, they just want to do this, or, something like that. It's just, I think it's interesting just to be more aware of people around you.
Yeah.
It's always success, right?
I mean, why not try and have the best tools in your toolbox to try and figure out how to best communicate to somebody, especially somebody that you know and love?
What's your favorite tool in your toolbox?
Can't say that on
If you
air.
had one.
Anyway, I was thinking about the love languages as he was talking too, and how knowing your love languages, knowing your personality type, and all of these things can just make you this very well-rounded person.
Take it further.
So, what are you? You can take the test at 16personalities.com/free-personality-test. 16 is a number, but remember, we will have all of this in our show notes if you cannot understand me or you just don't listen to me.
Yeah, the link is right there for you guys. And if you just go ahead and Google Myers-Briggs, you're going to find all sorts of places to find these tests. And then we definitely want you guys to go ahead and go to AJ's website because he's got tons of amazing things there. So personalityjunkie.com, he's got blogs. Him and his wife just have a really well-rounded website, and you can kind of keep up with all this stuff known from the experts. All right, well, thank you so much for joining us on this amazing episode about personality types. We got to learn so much about ourselves, and we hope that you did too. Another thank you to AJ. You can visit his page, www.personalityjunkie.com, to not only take the test, but also learn more about both AJ and his wife, and to partake in one of their courses or learn more about his published works.
Yeah, super interesting stuff. And come join us on episode 4, where we will be staying in the similar realm of love and relationships. We are going to be exploring love languages and what exactly the heck they are. And we have a great interview with the esteemed Dr. Arthur Aaron. Thank you again, and over to you, voiceover guy.
Thank you very much, Lianne. Subscribe now to the Forever Break podcast on your favorite platform: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, and more. If you enjoyed this episode, help us out and leave a 5-star review. And remember, you can find all the juicy details discussed in this episode in the show notes at foreverbreak.com/podcast.